We're back for another episode of High Ticket Woman, and we're in season 2. And today in the Experts Corner, I have Sabrina Trobak. Sabrina comes from the same place that I come from, British Columbia, Canada. She lives in Fort St. John, which is much, much further north from where I grew up near the border in Vancouver, actually Richmond. But I always tell people Vancouver because nobody knows where Richmond is. But I have a feeling Sabrina knows where it is. Sabrina is a registered counselor. It's so cool because I'm reading her bio right now and everything's written in Canadian. I'm like, "Oh, I remember the days when I used to spell counselor with 2 L's." Anyway, we're all okay, she is a registered counselor and she is the author of Not Good Enough: Understanding Your Core Belief in Anxiety. On top of that, she's also a clinical supervisor and public speaker. And just like me, she has her master's in counseling. Well, yours is in counseling psychology. Mine's in counseling and guidance. Prior to becoming a counselor, Sabrina was a teacher, a vice principal, and a school counselor for over 20 years. She has extensive training in resolving past trauma and the impact trauma has on a person, including anxiety and those core beliefs that often live inside of us that tell us we're not good enough, not important, and not valued. Her focus then is in her practice helping people challenge and change those core beliefs to feeling valued, good enough, important, um, and and worthy. Sabrina, thank you so much for agreeing to be on the podcast today. I'm so excited to have you here, a fellow Canadian. Welcome to the High Ticket Woman.
Thanks, Debbie. It's nice to be here.
Well, what's the weather like in Fort St. John right now?
It is cold.
Yeah.
It's about minus 23 Celsius and it's snowing. We're supposed to get 20 to 25 centimeters of snow today, and we got about 25 centimeters yesterday. So
Oh, wow.
it's an indoor day.
It's
Yeah.
end of a day, but it's a good day to curl up in front of a fireplace, which I imagine you have.
And do a podcast,
I
right?
do a podcast and then maybe later have a good book and I don't know, like that those wintry days. We never got wintry days in Vancouver. Vancouver's way too close to the coast and for much further south. But I did live in Wyoming for 19 years. So that's sort of what really taught me what a cold, snowy, windy climate, geographic region can be like. I did not learn that in Vancouver. Everybody thinks, "Oh, if you're from Canada, you live in igloos and use dog sleds to get to school every day." And no, people, it actually is a lot milder in parts of Canada than it can be in parts of the United States. But anyway, a little side education that has really nothing to do with what we're gonna talk about today. Okay, Sabrina, I would love to know what inspires you to write your book. From a personal perspective, but obviously from a professional perspective as well.
So I was a teacher for 20 years, like you said, and then I uh, kind of stumbled on this model of therapy. I went to a 3-day workshop on suicide that basically was looking at suicide from the perspective of that core belief: not good enough, not important, not
Mhm.
valued. And at the end of the 3-day workshop, I just thought, this is what I need to do. So I quit my teaching job, started my own private practice with
Just
the
like that.
presenter. Well, it took me about a year to kinda get things organized and get things sorted out, and Tony, who was presenting the workshop, took me under his wing and taught me his model of therapy, and within about 6 months, I had a waiting list, and that was back in 2010. Right now, my waiting list is a year long. I've had up to 2.5 years waiting list, and I hate having to tell people, "Sorry, there's nothing I can do." So I thought, well, maybe I'll write a book, and that way I can provide a resource for people who can't access counseling, maybe are kind of starting to wonder a bit about mental health and anxiety, but aren't really ready to go to a counselor yet, and just kind of gain a little bit more information. So I started puttering away at the book, and off and on. Took me about 7 years in total to write the book, and yeah, that's kind of where it is now.
I wanna go back to the 2.5-year waiting list because that really kinda blows my mind. There can't be that many enough people in Fort St. John to be generating that kind of a waiting list. So are you virtual as well? Like, do you
I
Or do
I
you
am virtual, but with my association, I can only work with people in my province. And the vast majority, I would say probably 80% of my clients, 85% of my clients are local from Fort St. John. Um, and there's not a ton of us that are counselors here, and a lot of the people that are counselors have a full-time job and then counsel part-time. So most of us do have a waiting list, but the other piece is when you're really resolving and sorting through that core belief, it's not short-term counseling. Most of my clients are with me, a year and a half, 2 years, sometimes even longer as we're resolving that core belief and challenging it to becoming more good enough, important, and valued. So I move through my waiting list very, very slowly, which then creates more of a waiting list for me as well.
Yeah. So, what's the process that you use to begin I mean, I do a lot of core belief work with my clients too, and I know, I interviewed somebody not that long ago, and they were trained in schema therapy. I'm like, "What is schema therapy?" And it turns out it's core beliefs, right? It's just it has this name that has been attached to it. What's your process for helping somebody really begin to rewrite these core beliefs, these unhealthy core beliefs that are inside of them?
So, if we look at models of therapy, we use about 13, 14 different models of therapy. So it's a very eclectic approach. Basically, when people come in, what we first do is just help them gain a better understanding of anxiety. So a lot of people talk about anxiety as being, the trigger, right? I have anxiety of heights. It's not about the heights. It's about my belief in my ability to handle something. So if I believe I can handle it, I'm not going to have anxiety. If I believe I can't handle it, I'm going to have more anxiety. So generally, if my core belief is not good enough, not important, not valued, I'm not going to believe in myself as much. And therefore, I'm going to have more anxiety. So that's really one of the first steps is we help them become more aware of what understanding of anxiety, symptoms of anxiety, strategies to use to manage anxiety. After we're done that, then what we do is we go through and they tell me their life story. And we talk about everything from homes they lived in to pets to relationships to any kind of traumas or abuse they'd experienced, all of their life experiences. And as they're talking, I'm looking through and thinking, okay, how does that impact or develop that core belief? Not good enough, not important, not valued. Often, as just a human being, we don't really tell our whole story to everyone because everyone we're connected to, we have a relationship. So we worry about, being judged, getting held against us, taking up too much time. As a therapist, that's all I'm doing. I'm just here to listen to you. And so people start talking about things that they haven't talked to other people about. They start making connections and seeing things they haven't really seen before, remembering things they haven't remembered before. So we go through and really get a good idea of all of their experiences and how that core belief developed. And then I'm looking at all of those experiences and kind of looking at, they all kind of usually funnel down to feeling either not good enough, not important, not valued. And then we go through and resolve those pieces where they gain a better understanding of why those things happened, that it was really never about them and them not being good enough. It was about the people around them and those people's core beliefs, and help them really kind of sort through and gain that understanding, a lot of reflection, a lot of awareness. And then we get to the end of the counseling where that core belief has changed pretty significantly. And then we do what's called a maintenance part of the process. So maintenance is where they continue in counseling, but I'm slowly taking a step back. So they're doing it more and more on their own. If I have a client who's, say, 30 years old, they've been in counseling for 2 years. Well, that's only 1/15th of their life. So the chances they fall back into their old ways of doing things becomes really high. So maintenance is the thing that kind of keeps them grounded in this new way of thinking and new understanding where they're really becoming more aware of their actions, their behaviors, and their thoughts.
And I imagine in doing all this core belief work that you also are identifying those triggers that trigger the initial anxiety because they have to have an awareness of what's going on around them externally that's pulling this core belief up to the surface, so to speak.
Right, and so, if someone says that they had a rough weekend because, um, there was really loud noises in their neighborhood, and that's a trigger for them. Well, then we talk about, okay, well, so why is that a trigger for you? Let's look at what's happened in your past. Where are loud noises been in your past? What emotions did they create? What core belief did they develop? What was the situation that it was like around you? Who did you have to support you and help you kind of work through it? Or were you more kind of on your own or just kind of told, well, suck it up, you can handle it? So we go through and get a better understanding of why that is a trigger. The more you know, the more you can challenge yourself to work through it.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. Let's talk a little bit about how these core beliefs, if they aren't addressed and rewritten, how the way they impact our relationships, especially with our partner or our spouse. I'm sure in your practice you see this a lot.
Yeah, we're drawn to what we know. So James Framo, who's a famous couples counselor, his idea was we're not drawn to what we want, we're drawn to what we need. So we end up being drawn to a partner where we feel loved and connected, but underneath that, it also reinforces and supports that core belief, not good enough, not important, not valued. So we're drawn to someone where we can have that sense of connection, but it's also continuing to fulfill that core belief. Our core belief drives everything we do. And for a lot of people, it's an unconscious awareness. We don't even really realize it's there. But we see people who get into unhealthy relationship and after unhealthy relationship after unhealthy relationship. Well, the common denominator is the person that's getting into these relationships. Why? Because ultimately those relationships end up reinforcing and supporting that core belief. So if we're not really challenging things at that core belief level, the chances that we end up kind of falling back into our old ways of doing things and supporting that more negative core belief,
Yeah.
the higher it's going to be for sure.
So when you say we're drawn not to what we want, but what we need, explain that a little more because there's some you're saying there's some sort of unhealthy need that's, you know, unconscious that's being um um word that thinking is supported, but that's not the word I really want. It's being played out in the relationship. So there's an unhealthy need that's driving this relationship.
Right. And that usually is that core belief, not good enough, not important, not valued.
Mhm.
That kind of drives everything we do. So it creates us our drive to be connected to certain people that are going to reinforce that, to event, to experiences, even our perceptions reinforce and support that core belief. So, someone at work walks by me and doesn't say hi. That core belief, not good enough, not important, not valued, says, oh, they don't like me. They must be mad at me. Why don't they want to say hi to me? What did I do? And it just reinforces it. Whereas that core belief, good enough, important, and valued, maybe, oh, I hope they're okay. I wonder if there's something going on for them because they usually do say hi to me in the morning. It's not triggering that negative in me, right?
Yeah. Yeah, our thinking can get so distorted when we have those we talk we're calling them core beliefs. A lot of times when I work with clients, I call them false beliefs. And then, we also have the terminology of limiting beliefs. And the way I explain it to clients is that false beliefs are just flat out not true. But we can also have beliefs that have an element of truth to them, but that belief is still limiting us in some way. So like if I say, I'm just a therapist. Well, I am a therapist, but that's a very limiting way for me to view myself. But there are also these, as you say, core beliefs that are just really outright false. They're wrong. So, what are some situations, without giving away, specific information? What are some situations that you see often in couples where these core beliefs have really dramatically been played out in this relationship and the relationship is so deeply unhealthy as a result?
So we often see, kind of opposites attract. but that
Mm.
underlying core belief is the same. So we'll often see one person in a relationship who's very quiet, kind of takes care of everything, doesn't really want to have much of a voice, is willing to kind of help and sacrifice for whoever needs it, right? And then we often have their partner who is someone who's a bit more kind of loud, a bit more kind of able to take control, is going to make those decisions. So they kind of work, they meet each other's needs. The one person says, I'm quiet. I don't really want to make a lot of the decisions. I'm okay to sacrifice and take care of other people. The other person says, well, I'm good at making decisions and figuring out what we need to do. And I kind of like being taken care of. And so they're drawn to each other. And so we kind of look at this as being in love. But then what happens over time, that core belief starts to percolate more and more and more. And the person who's quiet says, well, I never get to make a decision. They don't ever listen to me. I'm always sacrificing for them. And the other partner says, I always have to make the decisions. They never step up. She's micromanaging me. I never get my chance to just do what I want to do. And so ultimately, they're meeting each other's needs, but they're also fulfilling that core belief, not good enough, not important, not valued. We see that with money too, right? Where one partner is a spender, the other partner is a saver,
Saver,
right?
yeah.
And so they work together okay, but it causes a lot of conflict in the relationship. So both reinforcing that core belief, not good enough, not important, not valued, even though they're looking at it from almost opposite perspectives.
This is really fascinating, and I can think of so many people I've worked with. I think of myself even, and even in my first marriage, some of what you were talking about, I'm like, "Yep, that's exactly what happened." I see a lot now of couples. I'm curious about whether this is what you see and what you'll say about this. I see a lot of passive men and dominant women in marriages. I think the feminist movement and this female empowerment movement has created a lot of this. Can you speak to that from a core belief perspective? Do you see this? Is this showing up a lot in the couples that you work with?
I mean, when I say one partner's very quiet, the other one's a bit more controlling, it's passive and aggressive, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
and they meet each other's needs. And so we often see if it's an aggressive woman, it's a passive man. If it's
Yep.
aggressive man, it's a passive woman. Two aggressive partners, that's not going to go very well. It's going to be
Right.
too explosive, too volatile. They're not going to be meeting each other's needs as much. So we don't see those relationships as significantly. They're still there because we are human, but they're not as significant. Sometimes we'll see, a more passive, quiet person with another more passive, quiet person. But this is often the couple who's, been married for 30 years and they've never had a fight because they've never really challenged each other. They kind of coexist and shuffle around as roommates. There's still not a lot of that connection. So they still feel kind of lonely, unheard, not valued, reinforcing that core
Yeah.
belief. It just looks a bit different.
Swallowing. I often think when a couple sort of boasts about we've never fought, I think, well, that's because one or both of you is swallowing down how you really feel.
Right. It's not really realistic, right? If
Yeah.
you,
Yeah.
same with when I'm working with families and they'll say, "Oh, my child's so good. They're so wonderful. They never cause any kerfuffle. They're just really great." I'm always thinking in my head, "Okay, that's probably a kid with really high anxiety because that's not a kid's job. Kids should be challenging and pushing boundaries and, that's what they're supposed to be doing." So,
Mm.
we need people to have those voices for sure. But if we have that core belief, not good enough, not important, not valued, they don't if I my that's my belief, why would I believe I have a right to a voice? So we see people are either really quiet and they don't say anything, or they need to kind of force and jam their voice down other people's throats.
So these core beliefs that are false, unhealthy. Talk about how that impacts emotional safety, because a lot of times, we're talking about people not opening up in their marriages. A lot of times, what I see is that they don't feel safe enough to do that, but that still goes back to those core beliefs.
Absolutely. So, I think even where you say false beliefs, I may know it's false, but my clients don't. they believe them to be true.
Yeah.
That really is their belief. They believe it is true. And so they are gonna be drawn to people that reinforce and support that belief over and over and over and over again. And so what we have to do is really help them, first of all, gain an awareness that that core belief is there and how powerful and significant it is in all of our decisions. Because if I'm not even aware of that, I'm not gonna do anything different. Why would I? I don't know I need
Yeah.
to, right? So we have to have that awareness is really the very first step.
Do you ever work with somebody who comes in and the problem they present right up front is something very different from what you ultimately end up identifying as the real problem?
Almost every single time.
Yeah. Yeah, I knew you guys there was gonna be.
Yeah.
And so what's so interesting about that is that if you identify some of these beliefs for them, or you ask them to, talk about these core beliefs, these false beliefs, they may not, like you're saying, they may not even recognize that they have them, and they might go. I'm thinking about, like, if I picked up your book and I was not very self-aware, I might go, "I don't struggle with this at all. I don't have any self-confidence issues." And so what tends to be how does a person sort of begin to realize, "Wait a second, maybe maybe this is me. Maybe this isn't my partner, my bad childhood, I'm blaming my parents, I'm blaming my boss, I'm blaming my husband." Is there some sort of, like, moment, critical moment that you see over and over that helps people sort of realize, "Uh, there's something going on in me. I don't know what it is, but I need to figure this out."
In my very first session, I we talk about that. I'll say, people come into counseling for lots of different reasons: anger, alcohol, drugs,
Yeah.
insomnia, disconnection in their relationship, watching too much pornography, all these different things. And then I tell them what I say is these aren't really the problem. These are the symptom. There's
Yeah.
something that's feeding these behaviors. What we need to do is look at what's feeding these behaviors. And what that comes back to is that core belief, not good enough, not important, not valued. And we see this happening because, if we look at, say, alcohol, success rate of Alcoholics Anonymous is in Canada between 3 and 5%. I think it's around the same in the States as well. So if it was about yeah. So if it was just about alcohol, we'd have a much higher rate.
Yeah.
Of that 3 to 5% who do quit drinking, a huge majority of them go to gambling or anger. So it's just switching from one unhealthy coping strategy to another, still reinforcing that core belief. So then when we start talking about not good enough, not important, not valued, the vast majority of my clients go, "Oh my goodness, you're speaking to the choir. That is exact it's like you're reading me my life story." And so we're not aware, but it's sitting there. And so when someone kind of goes, "Hey, what's this?" and kind of really helps you focus on it, then you can see it a lot more. And then we start just kind of picking it apart. Student or clients come in and, I always ask, is there anything from your week that you wanted to talk about? Any updates? If there is, we ask two major questions to that. What were the emotions you felt in that situation? And what core belief was being triggered? So they're becoming more and more aware on a uh, very regular amount of time of looking at that core belief. So they start to understand it. Even being aware, oh, that's triggering my core belief is actually helping build the core belief good enough, important, and valued. Because I'm showing myself that I can handle looking at this and challenging it. Well, that builds the other core belief, the more healthy one of good enough, important, and valued.
So what happens when you get somebody, because we're not always lucky enough to get both people in a relationship into therapy. So what happens when you get one person into therapy and you've done this extensive work and they really have begun to identify these core beliefs, but their partner hasn't done this work. So they can now see very clearly both their own core beliefs and their spouse's core beliefs, but they can't change their spouse. So now we've got this unbalanced dynamic going on in the marriage. What do you do with
Yep.
that?
So, ethically, I think it is important for me to make couples aware of this right from the very beginning. So, if I'm just working with one person in the relationship, it is a conversation that we talk about how, right now, you and your partner are meeting each other's needs. You've got chaos, he's got chaos, you're meeting each other's needs. If the one partner, and if for me, the vast majority of the time, if there is just one, it usually is the woman who starts said,
Yeah.
if you come into counseling and you're getting healthier and healthier and healthier, now your needs aren't meeting his needs and his needs aren't meeting your needs. So that is going to cause problems in the relationship. So you need to be aware of that as you're continuing this journey if you choose to. And usually we see one of a few different things happening. First one is it's too much and the wife quits. There's too much of a risk to create that kind of a imbalance, so she quits counseling and just goes back to the chaos. Another one is, she lets her partner know, like, "I'm doing this, I'm working on things, you're gonna get left behind here. I want you to join me, but it's your choice and your decision." And so often they will join. Often when they start to see the changes and the wife isn't engaging in the conflict anymore and she's doing things a bit differently, it's scary to see your partner do that. They're basically pulling away from you and saying, "This isn't working for me anymore." So often we'll see the husband join and and start counseling as well. Sometimes the husband won't join, but he'll start doing the work. And so he's kind of limping along as things are getting better and he's trying to work through it and they're managing things in an okay level. And then sometimes, the wife ends up leaving because the partner is just not wanting to do anything different, not wanting to change, and they're just not meeting each other's needs. And so she leaves because she chooses, or she leaves because he's saying, "This isn't working for me." But usually we see one of those dynamics happening. So I always talk with my clients about that right at the very beginning so they're aware, but in my agency, I'm just about 50-50 men and women. So a large number of the women that I start with, their partners do join counseling. Not all of them, but a very good majority of them do end up joining and working really hard, doing really, really great work with it as well.
Which is fantastic. So I'm sitting here and I'm thinking about, all the couples that I've worked with, I'm thinking about my own personal life, and I want you to reiterate something because I don't want people to hear, "Well, you keep saying that we're meeting each other's needs, so what's wrong with that?" Why can't we just keep meeting each other's needs? But the key here is that that changes, that morphs into something very different as time goes by. And, I do see that in the couples that I work with, because couples don't come in, unfortunately, when they just have a few little problems manifesting, right? They cut in when they're, as I always say, hanging on the cliff edge, right? Then
Right.
at the very about to crash and burn, and now they want the therapist to save everything. So, um, yeah, I when you disrupt whatever dynamic is going on, in the marriage, if both people aren't willing to move forward and make those changes, something's gonna happen. Something, it's gonna change the dynamic. But I don't want people to
Sure.
hear, "Let's just keep let's just, hey, we're meeting each other's needs, so, let's just keep doing that." I think it's really
Well, we have
important.
to remember
Yeah.
the need is that core belief, not good enough, not important, not valued. And the sad part is that's what the vast majority of people do is they just continue meeting that need, right? And so meeting needs doesn't mean I'm happy, I'm content, I feel loved, I feel connected. It simply means I'm doing things that are reinforcing and supporting that core belief, not good enough,
Mm.
not important, not valued.
Yeah. I'm married to this amazing man now, my husband, Jeff. We've been married almost 5 years, and he is the most giving, thoughtful person, but I know that the underlying core belief there is that I feel better about myself, I feel more valued, I feel like I have worth when I do these things for people. And so and I know that I could take advantage of that. Like, it would be very easy as his wife to just let him, do everything for me. And so sometimes I have to stop him, and it's almost like he gets a little bit offended. I have to stop him and say, "Don't do that for me. Uh, don't spoil me. I need to do those things for myself. I appreciate that you wanna do those things for me, but I need to do that myself." But that, that's not always easy to actually to disrupt that pattern.
Oh, if it was easy, man, people would be doing it all over the place. But we don't like change, right? We don't like,
Really,
and getting healthy is hard work, right?
yeah.
Over time, we have all these experiences that happen. Bottom line, the experiences are over with. They're done. We can't do anything about them, but we carry all this emotion with us. And that emotion just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. In order to really heal, I got to let all that emotion out. I got to feel it. I got to sort through it. Well, that's exhausting, right? We have one partner in the relationship who doesn't really say much, the other one who makes all the decisions.
Mhm.
Now they're working on having more of an equal voice. Well, the one that's really quiet now is challenging the other one more. They're feeling uncomfortable. The one's being challenged, never been challenged before. So they're feeling really uncomfortable. Uncomfortable is what you have to do in order to have change. And I'll often hear people say that, you know what, how do I go about this and talk to my partner about this without causing conflict? I said,
Impossible.
you can't. It's okay to have conflict, right? What that looks like, you can have respectful conflict and you can have disrespectful conflict. So put a plan in place where you're talking about if things start to get heated, we're going to take a break. We're not name calling, not swearing, all those kind of things. But you have to figure out how to work through conflict in order to really heal. And in order for that core belief, good enough, important, and valued to change as well.
You just hit on a core belief that so many people have. It's not okay to have conflict. Conflict feels yucky. Conflict is scary, and I need to avoid it at all costs. Conflict makes me feel vulnerable, unprotected, unsafe. That right there, like, that seems to be one of the biggest core beliefs that I feel like I have to help people rewrite. Is
Right.
get conflict is a necessary part of the process. As you say, you gotta get uncomfortable to get change. It's a necessary part of the process to arrive, at the solution.
Right. If
With
you wanna have if you wanna have a voice, create that core belief good enough, important, and valued. You wanna feel content and heard and validated in your life, you cannot do that and make everyone else happy. It is impossible. So you have to be aware that, yes, what I'm saying when I say no or whatever it might be, yes, it may cause discomfort for someone else. And that's okay. That's their journey for them to figure out and sort through how they're going to handle it. I have to be okay with that. But again, if my core belief is not good enough, not important, not valued, I don't believe in myself. So everyone else's opinion matters significantly to me. So I don't want to upset anyone else because then that not good enough, not important, not valued becomes more significant. I'm trying to prove I'm good enough by getting approval by everyone else. So when I challenge someone else and they don't approve of me, that's really scary. That really reinforces that not good enough, not important, not valued core belief.
It it all really all does stem back to those beliefs that we carry inside of us that go all the way back to childhood, that were formed often in our childhood, which brings me to attachment styles. Do you do any work with around attachment styles? Because that we hear that a lot now, the the anxious and the avoidance and the disorganized attachment styles.
Eh, we do again, we're very eclectic, lots of different approaches. I
Mhm.
don't use a lot of labels. We just kind of look at what's going on, why what's feeding that. So you're pushing away, why?
Yeah,
What emotions are you feeling underneath it?
yeah.
I have clients all the time say, I just want to feel loved and connected in my relationship. And I say, okay, well, how do you feel about rejection and vulnerability? They, "Oh, no, I
I
don't wanna feel
hate it,
those."
yuck.
That's right.
Yeah.
I said, "Well, how can you have a loving, connected relationship without vulnerability and fear of rejection? You can't.
Yeah.
So you're only investing what you're willing to feel. which means you're not going to have a very healthy relationship. And emotions are, they're on a similar spectrum. My ability to feel love and connected is very much balanced with my willingness to feel vulnerable, disconnected, abandoned, lonely, sad, scared.
Mhm.
My willingness to feel those emotions is really what I'm going to get out of life. And we've generally been taught since we were very, very young, you push those emotions down, pretend they're not there, you
Yeah.
suck it up. So I'm living a very surface life because I can't do anything that creates any emotion.
I think also that what goes hand in hand with this is people's unwillingness to get quiet with their thoughts, because when we sit alone and we reflect, we journal, we whatever process we go through for that self-reflection, all that stuff that we're trying to push to the back of our brain and pretend isn't there comes up. If you allow your brain to think and process that stuff, then yeah, you're gonna feel flooded. Um, and and that's again, that's uncomfortable. So I imagine that's one of the first things that you also address is that people have to create time for self-reflection.
Right. We talk about busyness, right?
Yes.
All the time I spend focusing on all this stuff out here is all time that I'm really avoiding dealing with here. Right. So people say, well, I'm too busy to do any writing. Really? I see you once every 2 weeks. You can't find 15 minutes? I don't think that's true. Right?
Yeah.
Let's talk about it. And if it really is true, then you've got a lot of work to do because you are not making yourself a priority.
Yeah.
Right? And a lot of my clients, I'll say, just, I hate writing. Why do you hate writing? Well, because I have to deal with stuff. Right? It just is the way it is. So a lot of people hate sitting still. They always have to have the TV on, music on, people over, all those kind of things. People say, if I'm all by myself, I feel really lonely. And I say, okay, well, so lonely is something you have carried with you for a really long time. You don't feel it when you're around people, not because it's not there, but because you're distracted from it. But it's there. So when we sit in silence, that's really key to help us figure out what's really going on. Because all those
Yeah.
other things are distractions.
Yeah. The alone time is really, really critical for us to get honest with ourselves. But getting people to do that is, I mean, that's one of the first hurdles. Okay, as we wrap this up, Sabrina, it, f- just for the listeners, everybody's going to be in their own kind of stage of self awareness. What's something that you would want to share with the listeners who, knowing that they're in these various stages of acknowledging, I've got some things I need to work on. What would you want to say to them?
So I think the very first stage is that awareness. Just start to become aware of how often throughout the day that core belief kind of peeks through of not good enough, not important, not valued. And then when you start to challenge it, we need to go in very, very, very small steps. So even that sitting in silence, what I'll say to my clients is start with 20 seconds, just 20 seconds of purposeful, just being still and quiet. That's it. And if you can't do 20 seconds, go down to 10. Practice that. Practice, 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 practice. Once that's comfortable, then go to 30 seconds. So we need to take very, very small steps and we need to do a lot of practicing with each step before we move on to the next one. Whenever we're creating a new behavior, we're creating new pathways in the brain. Those take time and practice to develop. Often we see, especially people with anxiety, they'll jump from one step to the next, take great big leaps, but then it's way too exhausting, way too overwhelming. So they go back to where they were and they don't do anything. So if I take really small steps, maybe it takes me 6 months to get to where I wanted to be, but I'm going to get there. If I jump, it's just too overwhelming. So we need to go
No.
very, very,
Yeah.
very small.
Yeah, what you're saying is so, I mean, I recognize that even in my own life professionally, when I think about all the things that I have to do to get to where I wanna be, overwhelming, but if I break it down to just what do you gotta do today, Debbie, you know?
Right.
And then I add today with tomorrow and the next day and the next day. Wow, before I know it, I've achieved a bigger milestone. And the same is true in our own personal growth journey. So this is
For
super
sure.
helpful. Okay, how do people find your book? Not good enough. I see it there in the background. I'm
Yeah,
assuming
so,
Amazon or
yeah, yeah, that's the best way to get a hold of it is through Amazon. I also have a website, trobakholistic.org.
Mhm.
On there, there's links to purchase the book. There's also a blog page that has a whole bunch of like 2 to 4 minute read articles around different things around anxiety. I also have a page on there that shows all the different podcast interviews that I've been on as well. So there's a lot of information on my website as well. That I'm on social media. I'm on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, and TikTok as well.
okay. Well, we will make sure that we put all of the links for getting a hold of you in the description of today's episode. Sabrina, thank you. I mean, we could probably talk for hours beyond this.
I could go for days.
Off mic, we could talk about like client stories and our own personal stories. Yeah. I mean, this stuff is so relevant. Everybody who's listening, please understand that we all have core beliefs. The way that I tell people, you've got some underlying core belief that needs to be rewritten is when you say to yourself, I keep doing ABC or XYZ, or I keep feeling a certain way, or I keep behaving a certain way, and I don't know why.
Yeah.
When you recognize that there's a pattern to the way that you think, feel, or behave, and you may know why, which is great, you're a step ahead. But a lot of times we don't know why. That's that hidden belief that's driving everything. So, Sabrina, thanks so much for coming today and talking to us about this. It is absolutely key and it impacts everything.
Thanks for having me. It was nice chatting with you.
So, this is great. All right, everybody, this is it for today. Go grab her book, Not Good Enough. Like I said, we'll give you the links for how to find that. And be sure to go to my website, debbiecaudle.com, for um, my free resources under the resources tab at the top, and then go scroll down to freebies. There's all kinds of tips and tools there that are going to help your relationship. And if you haven't already, you need to go join my private Facebook group, Relationship Resolution. All right, that's it for today. We'll see you in next week's episode.